The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. This is Rabbi Marcus Rubenstein. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, the Rabbinical Assembly, and Temple of Aaron. Today is the first day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 29th of Sivan, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Sunday, June 14th, 2026, and we will read Parashat Korach this coming Shabbat. Let's begin. Me'am Loez. We'll now turn to the new Parsha, Parashat Korach, and we'll begin learning the Me'am Loez on this extremely interesting, beautiful, just important, and complicated Parsha. The Parsha of Korach, the Parsha that tells the famous story of Korach, who ends up leading a rebellion against Moshe Rabbeinu. Eventually, he is overcome and swallowed up by the earth as punishment, him and his family. And this is really an important Parsha within the Torah. This story is so important about disagreement and how to handle disagreement, and it's so important to try to figure out what was Korach doing so wrong. How did Korach, what was the Korach's problem? How did this begin? And so we're really going to try to understand how the Midrash and how the rabbis looked at Korach's behavior and understood, at least according to oral tradition, what was happening. And this is really all of the Parshiot and all of the Torah. It's important to understand what the oral Torah or what the Midrash has to say about a particular subject, but especially in Korach, the Midrash just adds a ton. And so it's really important to see how the rabbis at least understood Korach's behavior, and through that, hopefully we can learn what not to do and what mistakes were made along the way. So the Parsha begins, Korach, son of Yitzhar, began a rebellion along with Datan and Aviran, and On, son of Pelet, descendants of Ruvain. So that's the first verse of the Parsha, and we know that there's a rebellion that they're bringing. But the question, of course, is how did this rebellion begin? What was Korach's problem? And the rabbis give many different answers of what Korach's problem was, but this one is probably the first one to be started with. So the Midrash tells this incredible tale of Korach and Korach's wife. So let's read. It says, Moses had just begun teaching the Israelites about the commandment of tzitzit. So when Korach returned home and his wife asked him what new things were brought up by Moses in the course of that day's assembly, he replied, today he instructed us in a new commandment, that of putting on fringes of blue wool. Now, before we go on, why is Korach here talking specifically about, why is the Midrash connecting this specifically to tzitzit? It's because that is the mitzvah that was given right before this at the end of Parshat Shalach. At the end of the previous Parsha, they talked about tzitzit. So that's why they're saying Korach just learned about the mitzvah of tzitzit, and he's going home to tell his wife about this new commandment that Moses was teaching that day, and specifically to put that blue wool on the fringes of the tzitzit. The idea to put techelet on the fringes. We, of course, don't do this mitzvah anymore in sort of a majority way because it was lost for many years. Interestingly, the techelet was found recently again, so some people are wearing it, but for the most part, people just have white strings on their talis. So he says, what does this commandment of blue wool mean? Asked his wife. So his wife asked him, what's the deal with this blue wool? And Korach replied, he told us in God's name that we must affix fringes on each of the four corners of the four-corner garment, 3 threads of white and 1 of blue wool. So it seems that Korach doesn't understand the why, but just understands that, well, God told Moses, and Moses told us to do this. And so Korach's wife says back to him, he's playing games with you, that one, said she. Every day he comes to you with something new and says that God had so commanded him. But in fact, all these things he says on his own as they come to him on the spur of the moment. Right? So Moses is basically just making stuff up. I don't understand the reason of why God would command this of you. And so it seems that Moses is just making this up, that this just makes no logical sense. and therefore it's a problem. So she actually then designs this tent. She says, if blue wool is so potent, then go to Moses wearing a talus made fully of blue techelet and see if he still requires techelet on the fringes. And you'll see how logical this is. And of course, he says back to him, Moshe says back to him, no, you still need techelet on the fringe. That's what matters. It needs to be on the fringe. That's what the Torah says. And it's that point in which Korach realizes that the Torah is illogical, and God believes his wife here that God is that Moses is just making stuff up for his own power, just saying crazy things, and so the whole thing is then he just assumes is just for Moses's power. Now there are going to be a lot of other reasons why. But he basically interprets all past events as moments just to claim power over others. And he goes through a lot of the different incidents that have happened and basically explains them in a way to say it's really Moses just being power hungry. And this all relates, of course, it's important to understand that we still have to have faith in the Torah. That just because we don't understand it at a particular moment, or we don't understand the why, or the commandment is really tough or whatever, it doesn't mean that it is made up, God forbid, but is something that we have to cultivate faith in all the time. And this was very hard for Korach. Mishnah Torah. We're going to continue learning the laws of Kriyat Shema, the laws of reciting the Shema. We are on the 5th halacha. Hopefully we'll get through the 5th and 6th halacha of the first chapter in the Rambam. The Rambam continues, Korach Kriyat Shema mevarach lefanei lachareha. Blessings are recited before and after Kriyat Shema, meaning every time in which you say the Kriyat Shema, which, by the way, is the Shema, Baruch Shein Kavod Malchut Le'olam V'ed, the paragraph of Ve'ahavta, the paragraph of Vayim Shmo, and the paragraph of Vayomer. So those 3 paragraphs. We are also required to say blessings before and after. In the day, one recites 2 blessings before it and 1 after it. At night, one recites 2 blessings before and 2 blessings after it. So we say 1 extra blessing at night. And now we're going to go through what those blessings are. This is why in the section, when you're in shul, you might hear someone refer to the section as Kriyat Shema Ubirkotecha, the recitation of the Shema and its blessings. Very important. So, and this actually is all the way back from the Mishnah, states that we need to do this, that we need to say these blessings, and that's how long ago they're at least recorded for the first time, as that this is an institution that we must do. So he's now going to describe what these blessings are. The first blessing preceding the Shema in the day begins, "Blessed are you, God, the one who forms the light and creates darkness." So this first blessing that we say during the day is called, we usually call it Yotzer or the creator of light. And it is a blessing that blesses God and thanks God for the creation of the universe, the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun, and sort of how time continues to move on, and the creation of light, basically thanking God for creation itself. So that's the first blessing we need to do in the morning. He then continues on. The second blessing begins with everlasting love you have loved us. This is Ahava Rabbah. And this blessing, the second blessing, is about God's love for the Jewish people as expressed via the revelation and the giving of the Torah to the Jewish people. Right? So the revelation itself is the expression of God's love for the Jewish people. Oftentimes people just talk about this and say, oh, it's just about love. It's just about how God loves the Jewish people. And that's really not true. It's really actually more of a blessing about Torah and being thankful for God revealing us the Torah. So very, very important part of this. And I think it's also important to note how God reveals God's love. How does God love? God loves by revealing Torah. That's God's love language per se, at least the way that God communicates God's love. So very important to understand. And I think that really does change the way we look at the Torah. Then we say the Shema, of course. And then after those 3 paragraphs, we begin the third bracha, at least in the morning, true and certain, emet v'yatziv, it's called. And that same blessing at night is called emet v'emunah, true and faithful. So this is a very important blessing that really talks about redemption, about how God is actually powerful in the world of redeeming us from the suffering in which we face. And so that really makes it so that famously, the great Jewish philosopher Franz Rosenzweig noted, but I think that honestly this has to be intentional because it's so clear. As is really, this makes up sort of a trinity of Jewish theology, and not. I use that word just to poke a little bit and just have a little bit of fun, but really a trinity of concepts. The concept of creation, revelation, and redemption as the three jobs in which God does. We believe God creates the world at each and every moment. We believe that God reveals the Torah to us, and we believe that God redeems us and rescues us in our times of trouble. So those are the three sort of major dogmas of how we believe about God. So we actually surround our commitment and our statement of love and commitment to Hashem with those dogmatic beliefs. And so it's interesting that the rabbis sort of felt the need to make sure that dogma is sort of being taught about God through the recitation of the Shema itself. And I think this actually acts as a basic educational mechanism for a lay Jew. Even if they study very little Torah, they know the central tasks in which God needs to do when they say their daily Shema. Menorat HaMaor. So remember that the introduction to the first candle that we're in, the major idea of the section should be that it's supposed to be about trying to not be jealous, trying not to be a jealous person or a person who's constantly pursuing honor all the time or their lusts. So remember that the Menorat HaMaor is going to try to continually come back to this idea of kina and jealousy, and which kind of jealousy should we stay away from, and which kind of jealousy is kosher, which is considered okay. So he's going to talk about that here. And because it was brought up previously in our last episode, right at the end, right, that it's okay to be jealous of people, actually good thing to be jealous of people of people's good actions, of the good they do in the world, of the mitzvot they do. That's a good thing because it helps us become better Jews. So he's going to talk about another positive type of jealousy here. And this is not an easy teaching. I'm going to tell you this right from the beginning, but we're going to learn it. We're going to try to understand it in its context, and I'll try to bring out the meaning for us for our moment. So he says here, and there's also a type of zeal that is called kina, or zealous jealousy, which is considered a most choice mitzvah. When a pious person sees wicked people publicly desecrating the divine name, he should place his life in his hands and be zealous for the honor of God, rebuking and disciplining them to the best of his ability, whether through speech or through action. So what is being commanded here is the idea that when we see that someone is doing a transgression publicly, desecrating and thereby and doing it as a known Jew, and purposely violating the mitzvot, it's considered a very horrible desecration of God's name. And we actually are told to do something about it. We should try to stop them from desecrating that divine name, even if that means putting our lives in danger, even if that means, of sort of getting into a place of danger. Now, obviously, if this means actually life-threatening danger, I don't think the text is suggesting this, right? We're not allowed to give up our life or risk our lives for the sake of doing this. But if there is some sort of danger, maybe it's a social danger, right, or other kinds of dangers, then we should still step up and put God first and try to stop this action from happening. This is something that the Judaism Torah constantly talks about, that there is a need to rebuke and discipline those around us. Now, this is really hard in our world today because not everybody has the same values or is supposed to have the same values, because we live in a religiously pluralistic society in America, at least. And this gets really complicated when you can't be sure that your neighbor has the same values as you do, and you're not allowed, certainly in a modern enlightened country, to sort of enforce your values upon somebody else. But regardless, I think that there is when someone is coming up and saying they are a model Jew and they are a representative, a leader of the Jewish people, and they're doing something really wrong and really bad, there is a real importance to speaking up and trying to stop it from happening. Now, that doesn't mean you can can't do you shouldn't minimize embarrassment. Try to do it in a gentle way. To be a rodef shalom, someone who constantly chases peace, even at these moments. But still, one needs to figure out how to do it, even though it's uncomfortable. Now, the example he's going to bring is really what makes this very difficult. So he says, this is as Pinchas did when he acted with zeal for the honor of God and killed Zimri, the prince of a tribe. So the story of Pinchas will come up soon on the Parshiot. Zimri is having sex with some kind of non-Jewish woman, a Midianite, some kind of Aramean woman or what have you, and Midianite woman, something like that, and is doing it publicly in front of the whole entire community, in front of the Ohel Moed, in front of Moshe, to prove to him and show to him that he doesn't have any respect for Moses' laws, not to have sex with Midianite women, or not to become married to a Midianite woman in that way. And Moses doesn't know what to do. He sort of drops down, and it's at this point Pinchas spears both Zimri and his partner. And this is considered a good thing in the eyes of the Torah, because God says to him afterwards, behold, I give him my covenant of peace afterwards. And so this is a very hard passage. I mean, obviously, this kind of behavior would be completely unacceptable within our society today, and no one is advising it. God forbid. I'm not telling you that you should do this. But the reason is important. It's because those aren't our communal values altogether. It's not like every Jew has to believe this way or believes in this moment, and there's no sort of agency of the state to allow this to happen. Now, if someone, got up in America in front of the White House and said, I don't care about your laws, and then just started violating the laws, really intense, bad laws, started murdering people or killing people, and the police refused to do anything about it, okay, then I think we would agree with what Pinchas did, right? To go in and do something about it and create justice when the leaders can't do it. And that's what Pinchas did. But that's because we live in a state in which there is an acceptance of common rules and values and laws. We don't have that within Judaism, so these things are very hard to do. So obviously it's very hard to use Pinchas as an example here, but I still yet think it's instructive for us to give us courage sometimes to be like Pinchas, to step up and say enough is enough. We're not doing this. We're not going to allow God's name to be desecrated this way by Jews, and we're going to do something and step up. Even if it makes us unpopular, even if it's hard, we're going to do that, and we're going to put those values first. And that is so important within Judaism, to have the courage to put Torah values beyond everything else. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.